It was just supposed to be a training exercise. Nothing more. The sun was out, the birds were chirping, and Officer Mason Reed was thinking about grabbing a coffee after the session. That all changed the moment his canine partner, Echo, stopped cold in his tracks, staring frozen at an old, beaten suitcase half buried in the underbrush near the edge of Riverside Park. Echo never froze like that. Mason's breath caught. He stepped forward cautiously. "What is it, boy?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. Echo's ears twitched, his muscles tense, a low whine rising in his throat. His eyes stayed locked on the suitcase like it was something alive. Something dangerous. The quiet tension of that moment pressed into Mason's chest like a weight. He knelt beside the dog, feeling the hairs on his arms rise. It wasn't a drill anymore. Riverside Park was the kind of place where kids played soccer, where families grilled hot dogs on weekends, and where nothing ever went wrong. The suitcase didn't belong. It was dirty, old, the leather torn and stitched together in places, partially hidden behind a cluster of tall weeds. Mason pulled out his radio. "Dispatch, this is Officer Reed. K9 Unit Echo has signaled a find at the edge of Riverside Park. We may have something serious here. Requesting immediate backup and forensics." It felt strange even saying it out loud. That something this serious could exist here, in this peaceful little town of Cedarfield. A town where doors were still left unlocked. Where neighbors brought each other pies on Sundays. A town where nothing bad ever happened. Or so they believed. Within minutes, yellow tape was strung. Forensics arrived, cautious, moving like shadows around the object. A small crowd had gathered across the field, whispering. Mason kept Echo at his side, the dog still watching, still alert. When the suitcase was finally opened, the hush that fell over the field was absolute. Inside was a small collection of children's items. A faded pink sweater. A tiny, torn shoe. And wrapped in an old patchwork quilt, was what looked like the skeletal remains of a child. Someone gasped. Someone screamed. Mason closed his eyes and placed a steadying hand on Echo's neck. The town would never be the same again. It didn't take long for the news to spread. "Child's remains found in Riverside Park," the headlines read. Television vans rolled in, their towers rising like steel stalks near the park entrance. Everyone had questions. But few had answers. The bones were old, decades old. Early reports suggested the remains had likely been there for at least 20 years. The medical examiner found no identifying items beyond the sweater and shoe. It wasn't just a crime, it was a mystery buried in time. For Mason, it became personal. Echo had found something nobody else could. That suitcase could have stayed buried forever. But Echo had sensed it. He always knew. Mason spent his nights reading through cold case files, digging through decades of unsolved disappearances. Most led nowhere. But one stuck out. Her name was Lily Ann Carter. 7 years old. Disappeared in 1998 after a family picnic at Riverside Park. Her file was thin. Too thin. A missing person poster, a statement from a frantic mother, and nothing else. It had been buried, forgotten. Like the suitcase. Mason printed her photo and placed it on his desk. She had blonde hair, big blue eyes, and a smile that could melt the world. Echo would sit and stare at it, quietly. Mason made a vow, they were going to find out what happened to her. He began visiting the neighborhood where Lily used to live, just 2 streets from his own childhood home. Her mother, now older and frail, still lived there. Her name was Janice Carter. When Mason knocked on her door and introduced himself, she stared at him for a long time, then whispered, "She's finally been found, hasn't she?" Mason nodded. She invited him in. The house smelled of old books and lavender. On the mantel were photos, Lily in pigtails, Lily in a Halloween costume, Lily holding a puppy. Her eyes were soft, distant, tired from years of not knowing. "They told me to move on," she said. That maybe she'd run away. That maybe we'd never find out. But a mother knows. I knew she didn't leave me by choice. Mason asked about that day in the park. She told him about the picnic, the games, the moment she turned her head for just a second and Lily was gone. Vanished into thin air. Police had searched. Volunteers combed the area. Nothing. No clues. Just a lost girl and a grieving family. But you found her, Janice whispered, reaching down to pet Echo. This dog, he's an angel. Mason blinked away tears. We're going to find out who did this, Janice. I promise. But it wasn't easy. The Carter case had been closed for over 20 years. The original detectives had retired. Records were lost or incomplete. But Mason kept going. He noticed something odd in the reports, one name that kept coming up but had never been investigated properly. A man named Donald Riggins. At the time, he was a groundskeeper for the city, assigned to Riverside Park. He had a criminal record, mostly petty theft and trespassing. But there was a sealed juvenile file nobody had access to. Mason got a court order to unseal it. What he found made his stomach turn. At 17, Riggins had been charged with attempted abduction in a neighboring town. The charges were dropped when the girl recanted, under pressure from her family. He had never faced jail time. Mason tracked Riggins down. Now 40, he was living in a trailer on the outskirts of town, working nights at a scrapyard. Mason brought Echo along for the visit. Riggins was agitated the moment he saw them. I already talked to police years ago. I didn't know that girl, he spat. We're just following up, Mason said calmly. Echo here has a good nose. He found her. Riggins twitched. Well, good for him. Echo growled softly. Mason didn't have enough for a warrant. But he did have something else, persistence. He returned the next day. Then the next. He began pulling together more evidence, witnesses who remembered Riggins hanging around the park, conflicting statements he made in 1998. Then came the break. Forensics pulled DNA from Lily's sweater. It matched Riggins. The case broke wide open. Riggins was arrested, charged, and later convicted. He finally confessed, he had taken Lily that day. The details were painful. But the truth, after so many years, was finally free. At her memorial, the entire town came together. Mason spoke briefly. Lily deserved to be found. Echo made that happen. He reminded us all that some things, some people, are never truly lost. A year passed. Mason and Echo continued to serve, now local heroes. Echo received the K-9 Medal of Valor and was the subject of a children's book called Echo Finds the Truth. Janice Carter started a foundation in her daughter's name, helping fund search and rescue efforts nationwide. But the biggest change came quietly. One summer day, Mason adopted a foster child, an 8-year-old girl named Mia who had bounced through the system for years. She was quiet, uncertain. Until she met Echo. Then, something clicked. She smiled. Mason gave her a room filled with books, posters, and even a stuffed animal shaped like a little canine dog. Every morning, the three of them walked through Riverside Park. And every morning, Mason whispered a quiet thank you to Echo. For finding Lily. For changing lives. For never giving up. If this story moved you, let us know in the comments below. What would you have done if you were in Mason's shoes? Have you ever experienced a moment when an animal changed everything? Please subscribe to Pawsitive Tales to hear more incredible stories of the animals who change our world. Their loyalty. Their bravery. Their love. Because sometimes, the loudest cries for help are only heard by the quietest paws.